Okay, guys, I'm going to get going, and hopefully the rest of the people will start filtering in. So, as you know, this afternoon we're going to kick off our second round of themes, which are building on the discussions that we've already had. And to do that, we're going to have some inspirational Ren Talks, which are soon to be more famous than TED Talks. However, before we kick that off, at the end of the last session, a few questions came up around clean cooking. So we thought, we're very lucky to have two specialists in the room, we'd quickly get them up on stage to answer a question or two, just so that you guys have the full picture around that, because we felt that we could have a little bit of information about that. So I'd like to call to the stage Linda Davis, who used to be the director of W Power and is now an entrepreneur in the clean cooking sector. And also Peter George, who is the director of investment at the Clean Cooking Alliance. So thank you so much, guys. Please come up to the stage. Okay, so I understood that there was a little bit of information that we felt we wanted to go more deep in. So, Peter, could you please explain to us more about the changing market around clean cooking and how it's evolving into a proper market rather than being more of a niche product that NGOs push?
Sure, thank you very much. Again, I'm Peter George from the Clean Cooking Alliance. Apologies, I'm a bit hoarse. I flew back from Africa yesterday, so I think the weather is not treating me well. But clean cooking is not a niche issue. It's a major issue in the developing world. It's been interesting to be here the last day or so and hearing about the energy transition, primarily focused on developed markets, but within developing contexts, the majority of energy use actually by the vast majority of people is thermal energy for cooking. And so it's largely solid fuels, wood, charcoal, some kerosene. It's a major market opportunity, as was just alluded to, but one that's remained very untapped. It's been, again, driven by sort of development NGO sort of efforts. And not really addressed at scale with solutions that are financially viable, that are benefit from the R&D that's needed to have products and services. Really, people are using these things to cook, so they want a service more than they want a toy. And so fuel is a critical component of it. A lot of the development efforts over the years have really focused on stove designs rather than fuel supply chains. And where to sort of get to the question more directly, where we see the market evolving, fortunately, is that companies are, the private sector and companies that are trying to create business models at scale are starting to emerge in the sector. So that is around the production and sale and financing of stove and fuel solutions, whether it's LPG or compressed biomass pellets or ethanol or biogas. All of these are solutions that in different markets make sense for different consumer segments and are beginning to attract the attention of major energy companies. I was in Brussels last week with NG, who is interested in clean cooking. They've made investments through their $100 million social venture fund in a number of biogas companies, but they're also looking at other technologies now, pay-as-you-go LPG and other things. I think a lot of the interesting growth is related to the technologies that have been utilized on the power side. So I worked for a number of years in the off-grid solar space. And the challenges are bigger with cooking, I would say. The behavior change element is a bit different, but some of the same technologies around mobile money, mobile payments, sensors to monitor usage are all being integrated into cooking. So as the Alliance, we're very optimistic that in the coming years, scale will start to be achieved, bringing down the cost of fuel into more competitive range with the traditional fuels like wood and charcoal. 50% of people around Africa pay for fuel. So it's not something that is sort of an insurmountable market opportunity. It's a real market opportunity. So maybe I'll leave it there and turn it over to Linda.
Thank you so much. That was really informative. So Linda, I think you wanted to give us a little bit more information around a specific case study.
Right. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm going to anchor my remarks on 5 numbers. First number is 3 billion. Next number is 4.3 million. Next number is 32 billion. 1,500 and 30. So I'm going to start with the first number. You've heard it before. 3 billion people are affected by this issue. That is a large percentage of the global population, right? We've heard it in the plenary remarks. I don't need to repeat it. The next number is 4.3 million people. These are the number of people who die annually because they cooked. Unfortunately, women and children are overrepresented in these statistics. Every time my grandmother, every time my aunties in the rural village go and cook in the kitchen, I am aware that I'm literally sending them to a situation that is going to impact their health eventually, right? So that's 4.3 people annually. So these are the people we're talking about, right? I'm very interested when I look at electricity markets, when people talk about gigawatts and megawatts and everything, I'm thinking, where are the people? You know, we really have to think about the people that we are impacting, and that's another discussion. The number I want to talk about, and thank you, Peter, for discussing this, is 32 billion. That is really the market for wood-based, inefficient cooking fuels, right? When Peter talks about the 50% of people that actually buy their fuel, we're talking about a 32 billion market of inefficient, dirty cooking fuels, right? One number I want to talk about is one from my country. You know, 1,500 people die every month because they cooked. Again, women and children overrepresented in that particular number. Now, that's what gets me out of bed every day to help participate in finding a solution. 1,500. So by the time the clock turns December, 1,500 people in my own country will have been impacted by the lack of a solution in this issue. The last number I want to talk about again is 30. $30 a month is a budget line, a distinct budget line that exists where people are actually buying fuel, right? So that is a number that for some reason we as a global community, as investors, we are not going after this number, right? $30 a month is already a spend. We're not trying to sell expensive products to people who do not have money. They already are buying fuel, as explained. So to quickly just talk about what I think are scalable solutions, 3 criteria. We have to have solutions that are affordable and that are safe and that are clean, right? And that impacts whatever your global goal is. If we're looking at SDG 7, if we're looking at climate action, we're looking at social economic advancements, if we're looking at climate change issues, if we are able to provide clean cooking solutions that are affordable and easily accessible, then we get to impact whatever our global north is, whatever our goals are. I want to just very specifically highlight some of the market solutions that exist. Obviously, LPG is one of them, right? And there's a lot of initiatives in a lot of countries where LPG is being pushed from, instead of being a niche product for the very rich, 25% or higher income people can afford LPG. We're looking at having more and more people be included in this particular solution. So that can be done at scale. And it also meets the criteria. Maybe the affordability aspect is one that needs more innovation in pay-go solutions and other solutions to access LPG. The other solution is in the liquid market. Right now, a lot of our communities use kerosene in addition to wood-based fuels for their cooking solutions. Terrible solution in terms of health impact as well, and obviously it is not a climate-friendly fuel, right? So in the liquid market, a good solution that is emerging to be quite promising and scalable is that of biofuels, ethanol, which I believe has been talked about in the transport section, but a lot of people are not aware that ethanol is a clean-burning cooking fuel as well. Now that is scalable in the sense that the infrastructure to move large flammable liquids already exists with the petroleum industry. right? So the last mile distribution is where the innovation is happening and needs to continue to happen. The integration with mobile money solutions and making that solution more affordable is one that I find very, very exciting to watch. So in my view, LPG and ethanol solutions are those that could ultimately provide a scalable solution to this cooking issue. So I'll leave it there just in case there are any questions on this.
Okay, we might have one question. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut it off after there because we have to get buses and things later tonight for our fun party. Yes, I'm coming with the mic.
So we're here at a renewable energy conference. So what about solar and also electrification for the cooking sector? You know, microwaves or electric stovetops, and also solar cooking as well.
So thanks for that question. I think, so the Alliance takes a market-based approach. We want to support solutions that have the potential to sort of be commercial and achieve market traction. There have been efforts certainly on the solar sort of cooking side in different markets in India and elsewhere. I would say that there are a number of reasons why they haven't scaled. From the cost of replacing, components to the upfront cost and finding the right business model, to the behavior change associated with, putting your food out and to cook over a period of time, and it's very different than three-stone fire. So I think there are a number of reasons why solar hasn't really caught on at scale. Continue to be different players in the market that are interested in pushing solar cooking. Electricity to power appliances. A lot of the people who don't have clean cooking solutions don't have electricity, so that's one challenge. But then you have increasing sort of mini grid electrification and just more grid extension. Grid, obviously, that makes a lot of sense, but mini grids, I think there are, and I'm not an expert on this, but there are technical sort of limitations. If everybody's turning on their appliances at the same time, that it can degrade the storage and degrade the sort of mini grid infrastructure. So, but my sense is there's continued innovation on that front.
I just want to quickly add, in case I caused any confusion. So in my view, renewable is not synonymous with solar, right? So renewable, right, recognizing that a lot of this conference is predicated on mini grids and electricity extension and things like that. So I just want to say that when you're looking at integrated approaches, right, heat and power, if we're looking at the subcontinent, the 3 billion people, an integrated approach is how do we provide clean, affordable electricity for lighting and other uses, but we cannot ignore the issue of providing thermal heat for the cooking solution, right? And obviously all this has to be renewable. LPG is an outlier, it has efficiencies. Obviously it's not a renewable resource, but other renewable resources have to be coupled even as we're doing grid extension and mini grid discussions.
Great, thank you so much for coming in and giving us some extra insight this afternoon. Right, now, so that closed off the first thematic chunk of our conference. And now we're going to go to our next chunk. And to do that, we have got 3 wonderful women in the room who are going to give us some inspiration talks, some food for thought. So let me just take you through a little bit the agenda for the rest of the day. We are going to have 3 presentations, one around finance, one around communication, and one around community, all 3 of which are absolutely essential in scaling up renewable energy and creating our energy transition. So we're going to have our inspirational talks, we're going to have a bit of a coffee break, and then we're going to be moving into 3 rooms for 3 parallel sessions. After these sessions, they'll finish about 6:15. We're finishing a bit later because we've just had this extra bit of information. Dinner this evening and the evening event is not in this location. It's at a different location, but we have buses that will take you there. So the buses will be arriving around 6:15 in front of the N Now Hotel. We're going to ask them to wait a bit longer because we're running a bit late now. So they will leave around 6:20, 6:30. Is that right, Rana? Around 6:15. We're going to see how we go because we want to really enjoy these exciting afternoon workshops. You can take your coat and your bags with you. There is cloakroom there, so don't worry about wondering what you can do with all your belongings. After the evening event, we are also organizing buses to take you back to both the Holiday Inn and the hotel here at the N Now Hotel. And they'll be leaving at 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. So that's just some basic logistics. Rana, yes? 6:30, right. Buses will be departing at 6:30, so we can really enjoy our afternoon sessions. Okay, so now we are going to hear from Food for Thought, a little bit of inspiration to get us in the mood for our afternoon activities. First of all, we're going to have Kanika, who works at the intersection of renewable energy and financial markets in India, but she was also one of the authors of the Global Status Report. So she's very well versed in all things renewable. Following on from that, we wanted to give you a real inspirational talk from a strategic communication agency to really give you some insights on how they work and how you can really change the story around renewable and how you build that in outside of the sector and engage with other people. So for that, we have Laura, and she works at the intersection of creativity and sustainability, and using business to create positive change in the world. And then following on that, we will have Pauline, who works at the intersection of community and collective intelligence. So we've had a lot of discussions over the past few days about building our community, sharing information, learning from each other, and collaborating more. So she likes to engage with individuals and to promote and push creative social solutions. So with that in mind, I'm going to call up Kanika. They're just going to be presentations. You will be able to ask questions actually in the workshops, okay? So the one around finance will be in air. So that's right down the other end. Laura will be water, so that's the middle room. And Pauline will be in here, that's fire, okay? But we're going to have a little bit of a coffee break in between. Anyway, I'd like to ask Kanika up here now. And I'm going to cue up her presentation for her. So give her a round of applause.
So I hope you've all had a good lunch because that's the food you got. I'm just going to give you some thoughts. So not so much inspiration as just sort of things to think about and then discuss in the session afterwards. So actually, I'd like to congratulate REN21 on a lovely academy. There's been a lot of thinking around what do we do to get the transition going. There's a lot of ideas that have come up, a lot of things for REN21 to do, a lot of things for different other community actors to do. But the question that we haven't really thought about very much at all is who's going to pay for it. And unfortunately, that just happens to be a small but very important part of the puzzle. So we're going to think a little bit today about that. I don't actually have a very sort of long and expansive presentation, so you're just going to have to look at me for the most part. But also keep your questions, and then maybe we can sort of discuss them together in the session afterwards, like Alexandra said. But also, maybe it's a pity that today in this academy today we don't have very many financiers, but that's something that is distance that we can travel up until the next academy. And in the session today that we're going to have in the air room down the hall, we are actually going to think about what are the foundations that we can lay already now so that we can get more investors and members of the financial markets to come and participate in this co-creation exercise that we've undertaken here today. So with that, I'll start. So my name is Kanika Chawla, and I work at the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water. We're a think tank based in Delhi, and we work on emerging markets around the world. So it's very hard to make a finance presentation without numbers, right? That's the expectation that all of you have from me today, that I'm going to give you a lot of numbers. Yes? Head nod. Yeah? Okay, then I'll give you numbers. So this is a number that most of us will be quite familiar with. It's a top-line number. This is the annual investment that we saw in renewable energy in 2017, $333 billion. That's pretty good, right? That's a lot of money. If all of us got a little share of that, I'm sure we won't be complaining very much. But that is, by one estimate, very conservative estimate, the amount of money that we need to stay on this pathway just for the next 25 years, $12.1 trillion. By some estimates, that number is actually more than 10 times that, so more than $120 trillion, depending on how you're doing that estimation, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about later today. So but if you really think about it, if you break that down, that's 25 years, right? So you basically need what investment we saw in 2017 to grow by about 75% in every year from here on out. It's not something that's unlikely. I mean, if given all the great ideas you guys have to fix the markets and get all the regulatory issues and good pipeline of projects in play, we can make it happen, right? And it's really not that large, because if you think about the total amount of debt borrowing, and that number is not, the 12.1 trillion is not just debt, but just to give you a sense of how that compares with the amount of money in play in the world, $70 trillion is the outstanding debt that was given to just the non-financial corporations by the end of 2017. This is actually exactly how financial presentations, even if it is about the intersection of finance and energy, this is what we get to see. But what I'm going to talk about today is what do we miss behind these numbers, right? So no more numbers after this, I promise. So there's a lot of investment in renewables, and it's growing year on year, and so we're okay. And so should we really not worry about it? So it was okay, right, that we didn't discuss it for the first day and a half or almost 2 days of the academy. Not so much. Because while the number is quite good and it is growing, it's not growing fast enough, as we have seen, because it needs to basically be double that almost immediately. But more than that, this is not a homogeneous number. So what I mean by that is, even though the investment in renewables keeps on growing, it's growing in solar and wind sectors, it's growing in developed markets, and the unfortunate truth is money doesn't flow where the sun shines the most and the wind blows the most. And that's in the emerging economies between the tropics, where there's a lot of renewable energy resource, but there's not enough capital going into those markets. Then there's also other sectors. One of the sectors we've discussed a lot in this room today is the distributed renewable energy sector, but also other end-use sectors of renewable energy. And those are the sectors that don't even get accounted in the national income accounting, so to speak, of renewable energy investment. So we don't actually even know how much money is invested in renewable energy heat. There are estimates, and there are certain agencies that do that, but that's not a part of the common narrative. So we are, in fact, in some sort of a market failure, right? So there is money flowing, but it's not flowing where the best resource is, and there are underserved markets and underserved geographies and underserved sectors that continue to languish, even as overall the top-line picture keeps making us believe that we are in fact doing better. But why is that? Investment is always available where there are good projects, right? We know that, I mean, we've heard that also in this room. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you have a good project, you'll get the money for it, right? So you don't really have to do anything except come up with a good project. That's not true. And I'm sure that in your own experience as well, you've heard that. And that's because ideally, all of us have perhaps done at least one class in economics, and you would imagine the invisible hand brings the supply to the demand and everybody is happy. That's not how it's working, clearly. We are in a market failure because of information asymmetry. Everybody doesn't know the same things. So if you're doing a mini-grid project in Ghana, you have access to a lot of information about the geography, about the resource, about your end consumers, you know them well. But if you're an investment bank in New York, you're not really going to even think about what is happening in Ghana, and the size of that project and the amount of investment they require is so small that it's easier for you to just not think about it, because the cost of thinking about it, of doing the due diligence, is prohibitively high. So how are we going to address some of these issues, right? So finance, like the law, is blind. It likes things it can understand. So I would really like it if, as an investor, someone told me, oh, this project is really safe, and can give you, investors like alphabets a lot, so is it AA plus, is it just AA? It's like being in high school again, and what's your report card? So if someone said, this report card is good, and I will tell you what the report card is up front, and the investor doesn't have to think about it, they like that. But how do you bring that uniformity? So this is where the solution is not uniform. The idea, of course, is for everyone to have really good power purchase agreements that are solid, rule of law in every country, regulatory ease of doing business, all of those very happy things. You know what is the credit history of your end consumer, everything that you could possibly need under the sun, but you don't have that. So what are the solutions to get there are different. And there are 4 kinds of solutions, and we're going to discuss this also later. There's policy and regulation, right? So what can I do with policy first? So what can I say? Can I announce an aggregate target? Can I create some sort of an aggregation facility to signal to both the investors and the market to say the renewables market is now open for business? And that seems to work. India, where I've done most of my work, that happened really well, right? But it's also because we're a very large country, you can signal demand in ways that perhaps other countries can't. But then there is regulatory issues, right? So how good is your legal document? Firstly, how good is the law? Is the document worth anything? But then if the law is good, and then how good is the document? Does each clause make sense? And who are the winners and the losers? Those are the ways in which regulation can be strengthened. But then there is artificial ways to spur the market, right? So financial interventions. What can we do to create this artificial improvement in the report card? And this is the most fun part, actually, because it's like when you do badly in school, you go for extra classes or you get a tutor or whatever else. So financial instruments are very much like that. So can I, in some way, support projects and enhance their credibility, enhance their credit rating, and get them to be able to access private capital that they otherwise can't? So how do I make existing projects that have very real risks attractive for private banks? And so through financial instruments, and that's an interesting and innovative way. And then the last one is through governance solutions. So there is a lot of data. So the power system is actually one of the largest data generators in the world. There's terabytes of data that sort of come up every single hour that is generated. Can we find a way to enhance transparency so that everybody has access to much more improved data that they can understand? And can we use existing public institutions and get them to almost act as market informants so that everybody is speaking the same language? And this is something that institutions like Rent21 can do, right? So bridge the gap, make everybody speak the same language, enhance transparency and coherence in the sector. If you do all of that, at the end of that, you hope that there's going to be a lot more capital flowing. Is that greenwashing? Perhaps. We have $333 billion flowing today. So you have to have measures of success. And what will be the measures of success? The idea is to create a robust renewable energy market that has sustained flows, right? So if there is exogenous movements in policy, if there are macroeconomic movements, whatever else, things that are outside of all of our collective control, is there a way to still protect the impact that has on the renewable energy market? Can you almost say that we will create such a strong and robust market that regardless of if there's a change in government and suddenly we have climate skeptics and whatever else, the market will still continue? So how are you going to measure that? 1, with increased flow of capital. 2, through diverse sources of capital. So it's not just the same bank, and it's not just ADB and the World Bank and KfW, but also new entrants, new participants in the financing market. But also the third one is that they actually end up financing in a continuous way. So it isn't that, oh, suddenly there was a change in policy and I'm now putting my money and then something changed and I stopped. So you have to have more money, cheaper money, new sources, and continued flow. These are the metrics on which we have to assess ourselves, and this is the task that we have for ourselves this afternoon. So we're going to do some groundwork, so come one, come all. No, don't come all, the other sessions should have you too. Okay, with that, thank you very much.
Wow, I didn't know finance was so interesting. Thank you so much. I would now like to ask to come to the stage Laura, who's going to inspire us. There we go. With the power of strategic communication.
Hello, everyone. My name's Laura Hunter. I'm the creative director at Futera. I don't have any numbers to show you. I've just got lots of images, as you might expect from a creative. So I'm going to talk to you today a bit about Futera and our approach to communications. And I'm actually not going to talk to you about energy related to communications. I'm going to talk about climate and fashion. So hopefully we can draw some inspiration from those, from some of our case studies in this area. Just waiting for our screen to come up. Aha, thank you. So Futera was founded back in 2001 with this idea of imagine better, of imagining what a better future could look like, and then working with big businesses, NGOs, governments, charities to get us there. And fast forward 18 years, I think the need to imagine better has actually never been greater. And to keep global temperatures within safe limits requires nothing short of a complete decarbonisation of the energy sector. So the question is, how can communications help? It's a really big challenge, and it requires technical expertise and competency. But what I'm interested in is, how can communications help get us there? So to answer that question, I'm actually going to go back about 100,000 years. And this was when Homo sapiens went from pretty much being in the middle of the food chain, quite inconsequential as a species, to shooting right to the top and becoming the most dominant force that's ever walked the earth. So how did that happen? How did we go from being the underdogs of the savannah to the kings of the world? In his book, Sapiens, historian Yuval Noah Harari puts it down to two reasons. The first is that we can cooperate in large numbers, unlike any other species. And the second is this. It's our ability to tell stories, or what Harari calls it, we can create imagined realities. The human imagination is phenomenal. You know, we've created concepts like money, justice, law, the idea of nations. They don't exist in the natural order. We create them through the stories that we tell. And that has meant our ability to create those imagined realities has shot us up to become the most dominant force on the planet. And, you know, history shows us the power of stories. In Martin Luther King's famous I Have a Dream speech, he essentially told a story about a better future, a future of equality and of peace and of justice. And it was a story that everyone wanted to run towards. And it was pivotal in the civil rights movement. And as a creative director, I'm really interested in the power of stories and how we can use them to shape a better future and to bring people with us. And importantly, not just the people like yourselves in the room, the experts, the potential policymakers. I'm really interested in how we tell these stories to people outside of this room, to my friends, to my mum and dad, to my family, and connect these stories to the masses, because it's billions of people have the opportunity to act, behave, and buy differently. So if we can bring them along with us, we can really accelerate the sustainability agenda. So what story does the world need from us now? If we think about climate change, I don't know if you've ever had conversations with people who aren't working in this space, but their reaction often tends to be one a bit like this. They don't really want to engage in the debate. They feel a kind of lack of agency, and it actually makes them switch off from the conversation. And the reason for that is because of the dominant story that is told at the minute on climate change. It's one of, climate Armageddon, of scorched earth, of rising seas. At the best, that is pretty unmotivational for people. At the worst, it's actually quite a dangerous message. And the reason for that is, I think we can point to something here. So in 1928, Thomas and Dorothy Swain wrote a paper, and there was one sentence in it that became the foundation of modern sociology. So if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences, which I just find fascinating. Human beings have this really magical ability to believe in something and their actions will follow. So if you go into a situation and your mindset is that I'm going to fail, your actions will follow that course. If, on the other hand, you think more positively, you go into a situation and say, I'm going to succeed, your actions will follow course. It's also known as self-fulfilling prophecies. So when we think about climate change, where are we pointing towards at the minute? What story is being told, and how can that affect our mindset? Last year, Fiterra launched a campaign, a self-initiated campaign, to try and flip that dominant narrative based on this idea that if we're going to solve climate change, it has to start. It starts with the belief that we can. If we believe we can do it, our actions may just follow. So we worked with the climate group and took really technical proof points around climate solutions. So we looked at legislation that was being passed. We looked at technologies that were in existence. And we turned them into really aspirational, fun, inspirational, accessible messages for the public. Because what we found was that climate experts know about all of these solutions and actually believe that we can solve climate change. Not that it's going to be easy, but that we have the ability to do it. But unfortunately, that message never gets to the public. So the fact that we're now using waste coffee ground to make fuel, the fact that we're using carbon drawdown technology to make product. We used this in a social media campaign launched at Climate Week New York. And the messages, as you see, and the graphics are really cool. They're fun, they're bold, they're bright. They're less of this and more of this. And that idea of being human, simple, emotive, intuitive was a very deliberate decision. Because as human beings, we often like to think we're like Dr. Spock. We make very considered, rational decisions based on evidence. Thank you very much. But we don't. We actually we make decisions based on emotion, on intuition, more like Homer than Spock. And there are lots of things that influence our decision making. So, status. What's this going to make me look like? Social proof. Are my friends doing it? Are those people doing it? Oh, then maybe I'll do it. And the advertising industry kind of knows this all too well and actually uses all these triggers and motivations to make us buy things we don't actually need or even want at times, but drives demand for products. So how can we kind of use that as a way to drive the sustainability agenda forward? I'm just going to finish by showing an example of how we've done this in fashion. So in April 2013, there was a disaster at the Rana Plaza factory complex. It killed over 1,000 people and injured thousands more. And so why did this happen? We can put it down to a lack of transparency. These people who were killed were making clothes for the Western market, but brands and businesses didn't know what conditions they were working in or who was making their clothes. So how do we take something like supply chain transparency and connect that to consumers? Supply chain transparency, even on its own as a term, is pretty kind of dull. So we turned that into fashion revolution. We got people, normal everyday consumers, to demand supply chain transparency through a really simple question: who made my clothes? And every year on the anniversary of Rana Plaza, Fashion Revolution encourages people to take a picture of themselves wearing their favorite garment and asking their brand over social media, who made my clothes? A really simple, emotional, intuitive message that's easy to do. And the reach has just been incredible. You know, #1 trending topic every year on Twitter. We've reached 6 million hits on Google, 2 billion online media reach. So I'm going to finish where I started. I know that the work that you're doing in the energy sector and in renewables, it requires a lot of thought about how you communicate it. And what I just want to say is that the simple, emotive, intuitive message always wins. And that's how we can bring people, not just in this room, but outside of this room, along the journey with us. So I encourage you to imagine better and to imagine better stories as well. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And now for our last bit of inspiration around community work. So please, could Pauline come up? And I think you're going to talk a lot about building a community, which is also very important to bring people along the journey. So I'm going to give this to you while I queue up your presentation.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. How are you? Yeah, after lunch, before coffee, after 2 amazing presentations. So I have the job to talk to you about communities. My name is Pauline, and I've been part of the Make Sense community for 7 years. Do any of you know Make Sense? Whoa, yay, cool. I didn't expect that. So, oops, sorry. Make sense. So what we believe is make sense is how we can empower anyone to take action on the causes that matter to them. So if communications make an amazing job, you learn about what's happening with the refugee crisis, but you always think, what can I do where I am as a simple citizen? And so at Make Sense, we build the tools for anyone to take action wherever they are, working with challenge-solving approaches and the power of communities and the collective. And so these last 7 years, we've been able to mobilize around 40,000 citizens around the world, but we also talk with social entrepreneurs and organizations. And when we started Make Sense 7 years ago, we had huge ambition, but we had no money. So we really took Margaret Mead to her word when she said, never underestimate the power of a small group of people to change the world. In fact, it is the only way it ever has. So we built a community thinking we need a lot of people to do things and we have no money, so we're going to do it with volunteers. And after 7 years, I can now testify that this has been our biggest asset. Basically today, we can have people all over the world create local impact with Make Sense where we don't have offices, where we don't have anyone. So for example, this is a picture of a day we did where we said, okay, today it's the Worldwide Challenge Solving Workshop Day. And so people and volunteers all over the world organized workshop to solve the challenge of local social entrepreneurs and to help them on one of the topic. And so you can see there are cities all over the world. And We also have events every single day. So this is for today and tomorrow. And we have everywhere people thinking, okay, today I'm going to organize something for Make Sense. And this is with little money because we have only 10 people working full-time to manage this whole community. But why community building? Because there are probably other ways to do it. So my predecessors take inspiration from numbers or from images. I take it from nature because my dad's a gardener and I've been living in the forest my whole childhood. So I will use the power of nature to help you understand what we try to do with communities. So this is a landscape that is human-made. You would never find this if nature had it his way. There's no tree that would stand alone like this in the middle of a landscape, not having any help from other trees. So this is really the power of the collective. A tree feels much better in the forest because in the forest you can exchange information and goods with other trees. You can actually be stronger because you have the power of other trees around you. And this is quite new because researchers are just starting to really understand how the soil works. But what we've seen these last years is everything that's happening in the soils with the roots of the trees and the way they exchange so much things and make them stronger, especially with the fungus that in our communities we call the community developers. They're the one organizing all this. And so really what we're just trying to do is recreate this forest, but human forest. And why do we think communities are the best ways to scale up? It's because really this is where you will find the most innovation. If you look at nature, if you go into the forest, you can see all the innovation that is produced because all these elements connect to each other, learn from each other, and think, how can I build what I want to build on top of each other? So if you take the liana, I think it's pretty amazing. Instead of thinking, I'm going to take years and decades to grow my trunk and get to the sun, I'll just use a tree that's already there and I'll use that tree to get to the sun a lot faster. Imagine if we could do that and just, plug our solution on a network that's already here. And this is what we see in our communities because people connect with each other. They can use the added value someone else has and work together instead of against each other and replicate the solution that they see. So for example, if I take a Make Sense example, we had volunteers in Berlin who thought we're gonna invent the first Make Sense activity that's gonna take a whole weekend to happen. So that was the first Sense Camp, they called it. And it was in Berlin, it was I think 6 years ago. And because it happened, then someone in Mexico said, I'll do the same and I'll just build on what you did. And then it happened in Jakarta. And we don't even need to manage this because the community and people talk to each other and they build on each other's experience. The second way that for me, communities are the best ways to scale up is that you really leverage the power of each individual. And if I take the example of nature, I always say, imagine you go to a networking event and you meet a carrot. What would you think in terms of, okay, I'm networking, how could I use this carrot? For sure, you would think a carrot is here for me to eat the carrot. So I'll use the carrot in a project where I need to eat something. But if you look in nature, a carrot, it's not only the orange part. It has also the carrot tops, that is shadows for insects. It has also a specific smell that drives away the bee of the leek, the bee that eats the leek. So if you plant them together, they're much more efficient. What I'm saying is that if we stop looking at people just like orange carrot, we can see their whole potential. We can see everything they're made of and everything we can learn from them. So instead of thinking, well, Mary works on heat energy, And I'll connect with her when I'll need something about this topic, maybe learn more about Mary, everything that she can learn for you. So if I take the example also of a Berlin member of Make Sense, his name is Ismail, and you think about him, you think, okay, he's from Berlin, so next time I have something to organize in Berlin, I'll get in touch with Ismail. But the thing is that Ismail is also, all his family is in Algeria, so he can also give you contacts there. He works in a bank, so he knows a lot about how you can invest in social entrepreneurship. He spent 2 months on a boat in Greece to work with refugees, and so he knows from the field what happens on the refugee crisis. So if you don't talk to Ismail, you wouldn't know all of this. So what I encourage you to do is really to create these links that go much further than just, you know, your professional card saying what your title is. You have plenty of potential, and you can put all of this in the community to help other community members. So knowing all of this is why it is so important to nourish the links between your organizations and between each and every individual. In the forest, there's not a gardener putting water on each tree, so we don't take care of each individual. But what the forest does is that it nourishes a lot the soil. The soil is always nourished with water, with humus. And what you need to do is to do all of this, to nourish your interaction between each other. Even though you think it might not be useful right at this moment, the sense of belonging that you have in a community can take you much further than just a network of people who need to use each other. Now that I've convinced you that community building is the best way to scale up, I'll show you our canvas. So at Make Sense, we help other organizations create their own communities to work on a cause together. And so what we say is that when you want to build your community, and this is what you already have here, but you need to structure, is really to have a clear purpose that is known by all. What are you trying to do in this community? The second is, if you feel that you connect with this purpose, how can you connect and interact with the other members, with the other people who believe in the same purpose that you are? So here, you believe in the same thing, but probably all over the world, there are other people who believe as you in this purpose and that you need to connect with them. Then, if you stay here, it's just a network. You don't do anything together. So you take the next step, and the next step is activities and rituals. What do you do together to create impact? Then you need to valorize the members that put a lot of energy in nourishing this community. And thanks to a group of ambassadors, you can go further and recruit more and more people in your community. So this is what we've been doing at Make Sense on the topic also of energy transition. So we've built a sub-community that is called What If, and it's really citizen-based, and how we can bring more citizens in understanding that they can too act on this topic at the very local level. And so after a year, with the power of community, we've been able to sensibilize a lot of people to have also concrete projects come up or being sourced, the one that we don't see because they are so small. So we talked about Ghana, for example, the ones that are very small and we cannot see, but citizens, local citizens can source this project and really have the support of the community for these projects that are bringing local impact. So it is now your turn to structure your community, to think about, we are together, we know we have this common purpose, we are already connected in a way, we already have activities we do together. How can we go further in the next year with this community? And so it will be in this room, I think. So I hope to see a lot of you guys there. Thank you.